All right. Is mic going? All right. So let me start just with a question. Who was the eighth man who went to the moon? Does anyone know? Okay, probably not because no one really cares. But Germany right now is ranked number 8 in global AI development. So that's why we at meetup.ai we're trying to create an open and transparent conversation about the future of artificial intelligence. Let me introduce myself. My name is Rico. I'm 21 years old. I'm a student here in Hamburg in computer science, and I'm the founder of meetup.ai. I want to take the chance first to thank our sponsors, which is Vern Global, who have data centers in Iceland for you to scale your deep learning system. And also thanks to Inter1 for providing this beautiful location. Inter1 is a digital agency who build digital products and campaigns for customers like BMW, E.ON, or O2. So that's from my side.
Thanks for coming. My name is Fabian. I'm 25 years old, student from Hamburg. I'm working as project management is this working? In a software and app agency. I would like to thank Malte for coming in from Berlin. Malte is a very young, talented man from Ocean Protocol. He took the long way. And the Ocean Protocol is really fascinating. So we have a look behind the scenes today because Ocean Protocol has a marketplace to share data, to boost AI technology. And yes, that's from my side.
So let me welcome everybody also from my side. My name is Adrian Baeto. I'm a long-term AI enthusiast, and my motto is, if someone might tell you AI is the future, then just turn around. AI is here and now, and that's why all of us are here. So this is actually my background. And one last thing, I don't know if anybody saw some strange cameras here. So I just would like to inform everybody, we are live, and this is recorded, and it will be accessible via YouTube and Facebook. So if anybody has an issue with that, no problem. We have some seats at the back where actually you won't be filmed. And of course, if still there are some issues, please approach me. Then we might talk about how to deal with it. Okay, thank you very much that you're here, and now I hand over to Malte.
All right. I think I don't need this one. I have this one. Yeah, so should be all right like this. Just get it. Okay. Yeah, cool. All right. First up, thanks for the warm welcome, and very cool to see so many of you coming out today. Yeah, as Fabian already told you, my name is Malte Sielski. I'm, my role at Ocean Protocol currently is what I would describe to be a storyteller and somewhat a light dev. Today I want to give you a slide overview of what we are trying to build for, what we like to call a new service economy. So what's really cool is that most of you are here to learn something about AI, or probably already know a lot about AI. So, and you might also know that the two most important resources when it comes to developing new AI services or applications are data and compute, what I think we could call like the magic sauce whatsoever. Anyway, so another way to show this is in this graph. So two Google researchers came to the conclusion back in the mid-2000s when they published a research paper that data is unreasonably effective. So they came to the conclusion that at some point it doesn't matter how many PhD researchers or like very smart minds you put on a problem and try to tweak algorithms even more. No, but it comes down to how much access you have to relevant data, relevant labeled data. So this is also essentially the introduction which leads us to one of the core problems. The core problem is that these very valuable resources are essentially locked up in data silos and are only accessible to a few very powerful and influential companies. And I think that it's important not only to think about these resources as raw data or information, no, but it's essentially intelligence. It's intelligence which is locked up and only accessible to a few institutions and organizations. So I think if we want to break it down, it's actually that data and compute in the fields of AI lead to more accuracy, and more accuracy, sorry guys, essentially means more money, because you can offer better services, you can advertise people more accurate, and thereby make more money. And more money obviously means more power. And another very important thing to mention is that the data which is locked up in these silos is essentially our data. I think this is something that we should really start to think about more, and not only think about, but also actively address this problem. Even though we have had many occasions in the past few weeks where we have obviously been made aware of this problem, that data leaks and data breaches and privacy leaks that address like essentially billions of us, right? Billions of us are part of our daily life. Still, it seems like something is missing, like some kind of paradigm shift has to happen in order to create something that will make us more self-sovereign over our data and have more access to this locked up intelligence. So now you might ask, well, pretty sweet idea, but the likes of Google, Amazon, and Facebook will never open up their data silos. Like, why should they do this? Why would they give us access to their powerful intelligence, right? If it obviously pays up big time, right? Pays off, sorry. But I think an important thing to mention is that there are not only the likes of Google and Amazon and Facebook out there, no, but there are also many mid-sized companies in between that also sit on a lot of data. And on the other side, there are also lots of AI students or guys like you that are highly interested in setting a footstep into the fields of AI. So we have this little field in the middle over there, and this is, as I already said, exclusive to a few. So what has to happen to disintermediate this gap? I think we have some very prevalent reasons that might get companies and AI startups to converge, to merge and get closer together. When you think about data silos, a data silo where data is locked up is not very useful. But what if you open it up and make it more available? You can think of it as some kind of a magnet for data scientists and young people like you, potentially. On the other hand, pooled data can unlock way more intelligence than siloed data, right? The more people have access to this resource, the more intelligence we can unlock. And another very important thing to mention in this domain is that everyone will be more self-sovereign in such a system where we open up the siloed data. Not only more self-sovereign, but get more fair attribution to their work, essentially. If you develop a cool algorithm and you some kind of throw it on an open network, right, you will get fair attribution anytime that this algorithm or that service is being used. So that might be a few facts or a few ideas that might be valid or solid enough to unlock a new data and services economy where we some kind of merge data and AI services. Before I move on and give you somewhat more insights into what Ocean Protocol is actually trying to do and what mechanisms we want to use in order to incentivize organizations, institutions, and individuals to unlock their data and make it more available, I want that you know why we're using blockchain. Because you might rightfully ask, well, so many companies are actually using the word blockchain, and it seems like it's just a buzzword everyone is using. So one of the very cool aspects of a blockchain is that you can collaborate in an open network, in an open, permissionless, and trustless network without having to trust any central authority. This is a very core part that I want you to think about. So number 2 is that you can get people to do something. You can get people to do something by rewarding them with tokens. So I think the Bitcoin case, and most of you might have heard of Bitcoin, is a very good example for how powerful these incentives can be. This is a graph that shows the terahash supply of the Bitcoin network per second. Throughout the past 11 months, this hash supply has increased by 8x. This means that more and more people got interested in simply joining the Bitcoin network. Why did they do it? Because it pays off, right? They are being rewarded in Bitcoins for supplying the network with more security. And to make this probably a bit more visible, right? The current energy consumption of the Bitcoin network is comparable to the annual consumption of Chile. Or you could supply roughly as many as 6.6 million houses on an annual basis with the energy that Bitcoin consumes. Well, you might ask, isn't that absurd? That a technology consumes that much energy and thereby also has pretty bad ecological impact, right? Well, of course, you can argue that, and it is right, but this is not the point that I'm trying to make. I'm just trying to show you how powerful these incentives can be. And another thing to mention is that all the network participants do extract a very valuable key thing from that energy supply, and that is a trustless, decentralized network. So let's step over to Ocean. The objective function of the Bitcoin network is obviously to maximize the supply of network security. So what is Ocean trying to do? Well, as we want to open up the data silos, our objective function is to design incentives that will maximize the supply of relevant data. So how do we want to do this? Well, at the very core, we want to implement the core blockchain capabilities, which are that you can pretty much prove things very good. This is what a blockchain is very good at. You can prove that transactions have happened, right? And you can do that in a decentralized way, which means, once again, you don't have a central authority that you need to trust. So the amount of consumptions of data, for example, might be one way to signal how relevant data is, right? But we don't think that this is sufficient. So another way that we want to make data more searchable and more relevant, or to frame it another way, to make it explorable for everyone and enable everyone to extract value from data, we want to implement so-called staking mechanisms. Staking mechanisms are essentially that you put your money where your mouth is. So you back up claims, right? What you do is, well, you can imagine that you are in an open data economy and you found a pretty good data set, right? And we want you to be incentivized to share that you found something useful. So right now, you can only say, well, this is a useful data set, but you actually don't have the incentive to tell the truth because you can just throw out a claim and it doesn't have to be true. So to wrap this part up, we want to reward people with tokens if they supply relevant data, and we want to reward people with tokens if they supply relevant data and make it and curate it. Now let's have a look at how we actually want to do this and look at a little use case scenario. It is important to note that none of the mechanisms that I'm going to show you are going to look exactly like this, but it is one of the mechanisms that we are currently testing. So this is Alice. Alice is a data scientist, and she's somewhat lurking around in the Ocean Protocol data economy. And she found a pretty cool data set, and this is why she's so happy. So yeah, nice data set. And now let me introduce you to a very cool concept, a so-called bonding curve. As I told you before, we want to incentivize people to signal to other community members that they found something useful, right? You can imagine that Alice bought this data set and also consumed it, and she got pretty good results. And now she wants to share this with the network. So how do we incentivize Alice to do this? Well, Alice has the opportunity to convert her ocean tokens into so-called local tokens. Or you could also call these tokens somewhat a derivative of ocean tokens. The price for these local tokens is set, which means what you can, and you can see the price of these tokens via this function. So what is important to note is that the more local tokens are being supplied, or the more local tokens are essentially being bought by network, by people like Alice, for example, the higher the price for one local token gets. So these local tokens are essentially or represent a signal which is supposed to represent attention, right? So now in this case, Alice bought 100 of these local tokens because, well, Alice thinks that she found something nice, but she doesn't just claim that she found something nice. No, she also backs it up. So her claim is somewhat more trustworthy than just saying that you found something nice. So next to Alice, there's also Bob. Bob is also a data scientist, and he came across this data set because he saw Alice's signal, and this signal got him curious. So he also started to play around with it, consumed it, and also got pretty good results. Bob also buys 100 local tokens. What is important to note is that Bob bought in at a later period, which means that he has to pay more for these local tokens. So Bob pays an average of 1.5 ocean tokens per 10 local tokens, meaning a total of 15 for 100 local tokens. And Alice only paid 10 ocean tokens for her 100 local tokens. And let's put in another actor, which is Chris, who's Chris. And Chris also stumbled upon this data set and was already a bit even more interested than Bob, because the signal, the attention signal that Bob and Alice sent out was even stronger than when Bob essentially came across this data set, right? So Chris also buys 100 of these local tokens at an average price of 2.5 ocean tokens per 10 local tokens, or a total of 25 ocean for 100 local tokens. So now you might ask, well, cool, these guys have now these local tokens. What can they do with it? Well, on the one hand, they can unstake these local tokens, which mean essentially sell them again. Or they can keep these local tokens and also function as a person or as a network actor that makes data available. So if you make data available and keep stake, then you get rewarded proportional to the stake that you keep at a certain point in time. But let's have a look at, for now, for the sake of simplicity, let's have a look at a buyout scenario where Alice simply unstakes her token again, so she sells them, right? So let's remember, Alice bought in at a price of 0.1. Alice bought in at a price of 1 ocean token per 10 local tokens. Alice and the current price is at 3 ocean tokens per 10 local tokens. So Alice decides that she only wants to sell 50 of her local tokens. So she thinks that, well, I already want to take the reward that I should rightfully get, because I was the first person that discovered this data set. So I want to make it, I just want to get my reward and still want to keep these 50 other local tokens in order to probably profit even more in the future. If even more people join and consume this data set, because they have also discovered this signal and also probably came to the result or to the conclusion that this data set is very valuable. So Alice sells 50 local tokens at an average price of 2.75 ocean tokens, which gets her a total of 13.25 ocean tokens. So she already made a profit of 32.5% on her initial stake, which is pretty cool. And now you can see some kind of a very first layer of incentives that we want to provide to make more data available. You are incentivized to make data available because you can receive a reward, right? And at the same time, you have the incentive to consume this data set and to really test it, and not only speculate on the data set, because, well, if you are wrong about it, you might lose your stake or might lose your tokens because, well, if no one else joins, the price of local tokens will not increase. So this is one layer. If we think one domain further, especially for AI and machine learning services and scientists, why don't we take a next step and label data, meaning categorize data, right? And what we are thinking of is a so-called token curated registry. A token curated registry is nothing else but a list with items, right? It can also be a list with names. It can be a list with data sets. It can be a list with services on it. But what you essentially want to do with these token curated registries at its core is that you want to say, well, this item belongs on this list or it doesn't. So a rough run through how this process works. So this guy found a cool data set and says, well, it should belong to the list of data for autonomous driving. Let's keep it very general. So he claims it, and once again, he backs up his claim with this stake. This stake is locked up in a smart contract or a so-called escrow. And once this item is on the list, other people who are also interested in maintaining that list and curating items on that list can potentially say, well, I've also consumed this data set and I got pretty bad results. So you can challenge it. And once someone throws a challenge on the TCR, other people who probably also watch this TCR or any kind of network participant can join this vote, right? So people can vote whether this item should be on the list or not. And votees, once again, also have to back up their vote, which is nothing else but a claim once again, with tokens. So we enter the voting period. After a certain period of time, we get a result. And after the result, the stake is distributed to the winning parties. So once again, an incentive to really carefully make a decision or make a claim. Okay, now we've talked a lot about data, but well, what we can do with data might also be possible with services. We could also start and curate services as well as we do it with data, right? We could create TCRs for services. We could create services standalone, as we've seen with the bonding curves, right? And this makes a lot of sense to take these two components, services and data, and connect them in a network, right? Because, well, when we think about services or AI and machine learning applications, compute is, as I already said, a resource that is scarce, right? And you personally might not want to buy all this compute. So you want to do it on premise or decentralized. And data is heavy, right? So you don't want to store this data yourself. No, but you want to get access to this data on premise as well. So before I end my talk, I wanna give you some kind of a rough, big picture of what Ocean might probably look like in the future. So Ocean, you can imagine Ocean to be the very base layer that wants to, first up, like incentivize people to join and incentivize people to curate data and services. And on the other hand, we intend to build the bridges and connect all the necessary components in order to make such a massive network work, right? If you think about like AI, for example, which is interesting for you guys, I talked about compute on premise, for example. So you found a nice data set, and now you want to train your algorithm on it. So how would you do this? Well, therefore, we would have to pull in a service that can potentially solve this task for you. So these are the bridges that we want to build and enable AI and services, AI services and data to be more open in a decentralized network. if we have a little outlook into the future and think even further, well, we've already some kind of concluded that data and services are a very good match, right? They depend on each other. Like data in itself is not very useful, but if you feed it into services or AI, then it becomes useful. And when we think about an open network, we can imagine that people might not only have an economic incentive to join a network or to curate a service or to provide data for a service. No, they might also have intrinsic value to do so, because you might have a huge interest that a service exists, be it as a company or as an individual. So you might want to contribute to the service in order to make it happen, to bring it to life, and to consume the service. And this is some kind of the idea of the emergence of tribes and communities. And communities can only exist in open and permissionless networks. And this is also one of the core aspects why a data economy and a service economy should be decentralized and open for everyone and not locked up. Because then we can some kind of involve everyone and involve more people's opinion and pool intelligence and make intelligence and knowledge more available. This is some kind of very much an outlook into the future. So yeah, to wrap it up, I think it's time to unite us, unite the clans, make data and services open, more available, and build communities around it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Malte. Thank you very much. All right. So are there any questions for Malte first? All right, right there.
So what kind of technology are you using to actually store the data on-chain? And what kind of consensus are you using? Are you using your own chain or are you using another chain?
Mm-hmm. So data itself won't be stored on-chain. That's just not feasible. Blockchains are not made to store data on-chain. What will be stored on-chain can be, for example, like metadata, information about prices of a data set, for example. And when it comes to storing data, this is also another layer that we have to plug into the ocean ecosystem. You could, you as a data provider can store your data wherever you want to, right? You can use S3 or you can use decentralized solutions such as IPFS, for example, or you could store files in Filecoin. Like that's up to the provider. We keep it in that respect. We keep it very, very open. And concerning the second question, well, our consensus algorithm is potentially very comparable to the proof of work consensus algorithm from Bitcoin. And well, do you have a more specific question in that domain? Like,
So
for
that
example,
means
how I can imagine that you want to know how it might work more specifically if we have a provider and a consumer, for example.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, yeah. So when you as a provider have a data set and you as a consumer, you want to buy it, the first thing that you do is that you set up a service contract. In this service contract, you as a consumer, you put in your the service fee that you might have to pay, and the provider might also put in some stake, right? Because at this point in time, we are not sure, we don't have any proof yet that the service has actually been delivered. So this service contract is then deployed on chain, and the next thing that happens is that you as a consumer, you want to get access to the data set, right? So you as a provider have to know whether the consumer that wants to get access to your data set is actually the person that should get access. So this information is also stored on chain, and the provider can extract this information from the chain, or to make it more specific, the consumer actually gets an access token, with which he can access the service, right?
Okay, so it's all hypothetical, and there has been no development in terms of blockchain or anything?
From the ocean side?
Yes.
Well, essentially, we are in the building phase.
Okay, but it's like it gets fuzzy around your consensus if you don't know, like how do you actually provide the network? How do you actually verify all that's going on?
All this, like the detailed information about how the very low technology stack works can be found in the white paper. Because from my side, I'm not working on the core technology stack.
Okay, because I just thought we're at an AI meetup, and if we have important data, we need to know how it's actually gonna work on your side, and if it's actually private, or where do you store it, and if it's actually working, and how far away are you, and so on.
How far? Well, as I said, we are currently in the development phase, and we will release a mainnet in Q1 2019, and actually in mid-August we will release a first testnet. Yeah.
Okay. Fair.
I think there's a possible problem with this idea. As you mentioned earlier, companies have big data sets. Would it, for example, Instagram has a huge data set of faces and facial expressions. They could use that to train a very good AI for faces, and by using that they could generate them. And if they then feed it into that ocean, they would more or less monopolize it.
Sorry, I didn't get it acoustically.
They could use that AI to generate data.
Yeah.
Which they could then feed into that ocean and monopolize, in this case, face data.
You mean that Instagram could do that, for example?
Yeah. So you still have the problem that big companies with lots of money would be able to own the market.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we cannot prevent, right? And as I said, we are a permissionless network, so basically everyone can join, right? And in what way you use the network is something. I mean, we try to design the incentives in a way that people make it more open. But the example that you named is possible, yeah.
Similar question. What about the legal stuff? For instance, in your example, what if the data comes out that Alice is not the owner of this data?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Okay. Well, he asked about legal implications. Like, what about private data, for example? So, or what about, I think another part of the question was, what if someone is not the right holder to this data, for example? Yeah, very, very good question. And also, of course, in the current setting, a problem. So, and this vetting process, like checking whether someone is the legal rights holder to a data set or not, is something that might, in the current state, happen more off-chain than on-chain. Because currently there are not really open registries where you have data rights or beholder rights to data sets. So we once again try to bridge this problem and incentivize people to check whether someone is the legal rights holder to a data set or not. And if you find out that someone isn't, you will once again get rewarded for this. So you're totally right. It is currently very, very hard to deterministically prove these things or get direct proof automatically in the network. So this is why we create these incentive games in order to bridge and solve some of these problems. Yeah.